in Edo State, if the governor is from Benin, that's Edo South, be sure that the deputy governor will be from Edo North or Edo Central. This is with a view to give vent to our republicanism, to our federalism. We are a federal setup. We are not a unitary system of government. What it means today, Ruben, is that the president can decide to sit with the entire security to discuss Nigeria's security, and they could speak in one language, in Hausa language, because the chief of army staff is from there. The chief of air staff is from there. The inspector general of police is from there. The director general of SSL or DSS is from there. The comptroller general of customs is from there. The comptroller general of immigration is from there. The comptroller general of prisons is from there. The director general of NIA, DIA is from there. The acting chairman of EFCC is from there. Indeed, so when I went abroad 2 weeks ago, and I just came back, some people in the US asked me, is your country an Islamic republic? And I said, no. Why do you ask? They said, because every name they are saying is either a Yusuf or a Muhammad or a Bawa. And I said, well, it is not. We are a republican country. We are a federal setup. I think, I do not know who is advising Mr. President. I think a lot of violence is being done to Nigerian unity. A lot of violence is being done to the sense of belonging of the average Nigerian. I am from Ijukwe, a small village near Agenibode, in the East local government area of Edo State. I want to feel that I belong to Nigeria. Yes.
Chief Ozekoman, there are some people who have argued that, look, yes, if you look at Yusuf Bichi's profile, that his experience is competent. I mean, he had even retired. He was recalled from retirement to come and take on this assignment. And we should be talking about competence rather than his geographical extraction.
To me, that argument stands logic on its head. It doesn't even fly at all. And you yourself know that argument. Then if we feel that it is all about competence, then let us destroy the Constitution. Let us throw away the Constitution into the sea. So that we are operating a military system of government or a unitary system of government. You cannot talk about are there no competent Nigerians from other sections of the country? Look, my local government alone, East local government alone, you can have a president of Nigeria, vice president of Nigeria, all the 36 ministers, all the other 6 ministers from the 6 geopolitical zones. You can have all the heads of MDAs. But is that what? It was because of that the Constitution, the supreme law of the land, the fond el origo, the ground norm, in section 1, subsection 1, says this Constitution shall be supreme. He said, this Constitution shall be supreme. And under section 1, subsection 3, says, if any other law is inconsistent with the provisions of this Constitution, that other law shall be null and void to the extent of the inconsistency.
Yeah, but we're talking about national security. Hello? We're talking about national security here. And the appointment is about the Department of State Security. And the president at the NBA conference recently just said, look, there may be situations whereby, or in fact, that, government has the right to subordinate the rule of law to national security. But you are quoting the Constitution. The president says, national security is supreme, not the rule of law.
No, that statement to me, with all respect, was unfortunate. And if it was written for him, for example, by a lawyer, I think the integrity of that lawyer should be questioned. Because right from pristine times, man decided to submit to a state to be governed by rule and not by rule of the thumb, as in the Hobbesian state of nature, where life was short, nasty, and brutish. We came from an era of the caveman, Australopithecus, to where we are today because there's what we call rule of law. In fact, it was the breach of rule of law in the Garden of Eden, where everything was in normalcy, that God, as patient as he was, omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, even though he saw Adam and Eve committing the original sin, he still gave them a fair hearing by asking them one by one, why did you do this? And after hearing them out, he decided to punish them by driving them out of the Garden of Eden. It was the breach of rule of law. What Mr. President must have been ill-advised on was a judgment delivered by the Supreme Court in the case of Dokubo Asari against the state. They misapplied the facts. In that case, he was applying for bail, which was rejected by the Federal High Court. He went on appeal to the Court of Appeal. It was rejected. He went on appeal to the Supreme Court, and he was pleading his fundamental rights. And the Supreme Court said, hello, when you are talking about fundamental rights of you, an individual who has been accused of treason and treasonable felonies and of insurrection, trying to overthrow the government of the, we have to subordinate that right to national security. It was not a case of rule of law, because rule of law is the mother of governance, is the mother of constitutional democracy. Rule of law precedes every other thing. Without rule of law, you can't even have a country. So you have to look at the definition of rule of law by Professor A.V. Dicey. He said it is the subordination of every person, every institution, every organ of government to certain laws that have been agreed upon, and that no one should act above the law. No one must be above the law, and that everybody must subject himself to certain laid down guidelines to govern our country. Otherwise, everybody will carry a machete or a shovel or a cudgel or a hammer or a gun to fight if there's no rule of law. So there's nowhere in the world you can say that national security is superior to rule of law. Rather, rule of law is the father, grandfather, mother, and grandmother of national security any day, anytime. Without it, we are doomed as a country.
Under this administration, President Buhari has been issuing a number of executive orders. And those executive orders, they seem to appear new in our democratic process. What's your assessment of those executive orders, particularly Executive Order number 6, dealing with the seizure, the unilateral seizure of assets by government?
Executive Order number 6 is illegal, it is immoral, it is unconstitutional, and it flies in the face because it is itself a breach of the rule of law that we are talking about. Executive Order number 6 started on a false premises. For example, it realizes that there are certain cases already pending before the court being handled by another arm of government, the judiciary, under Section 6 of the Constitution. The executive is Section 5, and the legislature is Section 4. All these are called with the doctrine of separation of powers, ably propounded by Baron de Montesquieu, a great French philosopher, in 1748. Now, if certain cases are already before the court, how do you make an executive order forfeiting and attaching the properties and monies of those people whose cases are already before the court? What do you want the court to decide? There's another strange introduction into that Executive Order number 6. It actually named about 152 people, politically exposed people. I said, these people, we are coming after you. That is what you call a law made ad hominem. Any law made ad hominem targeted at particular persons or a group of people is already a bad law ab initio because it is unconstitutional. A law must be applicable to the generality of the people without discrimination. So Executive Order number 6 seeks to misappropriate, not appropriate, the powers of the judiciary and also the powers of the National Assembly to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Nigeria, which the National Assembly has already done by promulgating the ICPC Act, the EFCC Act, the Nigerian Police Act, and all the National Intelligence Agency Act, under which you have the NIA, DIA, and DSS. So you cannot now go into the realm of another part of government to go and take over their powers. Otherwise, the judiciary itself will be useless. Don't forget that the president, about 2 years ago, said the judiciary was his headache. And of course, we saw what the DSSS did. They wore hooded masks. They descended on houses of judges in the wee hours between 12 midnight and 6 a.m. None of them has been convicted. Dragged them, some of them on the floor of their bosses. They went later to the National Assembly, blocked it, subjected people to indignity and inhumanity. So the president is showing not just a body language, but a blatant expression that he seems to be more comfortable with military dictatorship, under which in 1984 he promulgated decrees number 2 and number 4, under which people could be detained whimsically, capriciously, arbitrarily for so-called breaches of state security. And don't forget, under Decree 4, truth, even if you uttered truth, but which was embarrassing, was criminalized, under which Unduka Irabo of the Guardian and Tude Thompson of the Vanguard were detained until Nigerians started crying out. And in fact, they were sentenced. So we cannot rule by brute force or rule of the thumb. It cannot work. Well, democracy, constitutional democracy, means that we must subject all government actions to the rule of law, to the acid test of constitutionalism, and that you must obey the Constitution, which is the ground norm. If you don't obey the Constitution, then you are destroying democracy.
If I may cut in here at this point. Now, if you look at the Buhari government, there are many senior lawyers in that government, including the vice president, who is a professor of law, including your former teacher, Professor Ishesage. But you've been talking about rule of law, respecting the Constitution. And yet there are lawyers in that government. Your former teacher, for example, Professor Sage, in one particular case involving the Minister of Finance, who has issues with our exemption certificate from NYSC, the professor said, look, the law is not important. What is important is the competence of Kemi Adeosun, and that Kemi Adeosun is useful to the government, and nobody should talk about any certificates. So, all lawyers, in government, saying one thing, other lawyers saying another thing. What's your reaction in particular to what Professor Sage said? What's your reaction?
Yeah, I expected him to. Yeah, I had expected the learned professor to deny that statement. I was surprised that he later re-echoed it. He was my teacher at the University of Ife. In fact, he helped me to read law. I had to change from English department to read law and lost a year in the process. Because of that, I'm very wary of criticizing him publicly. If you did not mention his name or you did not raise the issue, I will discuss the issue without even mentioning his name. But I think that statement, to me, is unfortunate, because he is saying that competency, not integrity, not lawfulness, should determine how a person should be retained in government. That, to me, suggests the narrow definition that this government has so far given to the issue of corruption. They seem to think that corruption is simply the giving and taking of illicit money or bribe. And that is why they talk about recovery of loot from septic tanks, graveyards, cemeteries, supermarkets, airports. Of course, we are not seeing the evidence of this looted fund, where they are kept, because we have been hearing that the same looted fund which has been recovered is being relooted. Now, I wrote last year to the acting president, Professor Oshibanjo SAM, to let Nigerians know how much has been gotten from these looters, how much money, where are the properties. I didn't get any reply. So that narrow definition of corruption is what is bedeviling the government. They do not seem to understand that political corruption is even more dangerous, more odious than economic corruption, because political terrain gives birth to the economic terrain. If your political organogram is wrong, your economy has to be wrong. Nothing like oil subsidy, that it was a scam. As at that time, about 500 billion naira was being used annually for on oil subsidy. Today, this government has used over 2 trillion naira on oil subsidy, but quietly and under the rug. Where is this money coming from? Was it appropriated by the National Assembly? They have to give us answers. All the so-called looted funds that have been recovered, the monies, the properties, where are they? Can they give an account to Nigerians? Because what is happening today, Ruben, is that once you cross over, of course, PDP and APC, like I've always said, are the same 6.5 dozen. The same Prince of Denmark, and the same Akara, the same Momoy, and the same beans. They are one and the same. The leading lies today, about 95% in APC, were either governors or ministers or legislators in the PDP. So there's really no difference between them. But what is happening is that once a person crosses over from the PDP to the APC, even without any ideological delineation, like Naaman the leper, who was dipped into River Jordan 7 times, and he became cleansed of his leprosy, that person automatically becomes clean. He becomes politically correct. This government hugs corruption. It embraces corruption. But does not see anything wrong in...
Some members of this administration, the Buhari administration, claim that you are critical of the government because many of the clients you represent in court have one issue or the other with the government in terms of, crimes, alleged crimes that may have been committed, and that you are a biased critic of the government.
Such people should read my history. Go and read my statement even on January 24 during the Oka coup. That's in 1990. That's about 28 years ago. They should know that I am one of the co-founders of the first human rights body in Nigeria, the Civil Liberties Organization, which we founded on the 15th of October, 1987. If they look at my history, they will notice that I have been correct, I have been objective in my analysis. In fact, today I handle more cases, for your information, for APC people than for PDP people. And by the way, even if my clients were from one political party, the rules of my professional ethics, the legal profession, and Section 36 of the Constitution, the law that we have to operate and obey, says that a litigant is entitled, any person accused of a criminal offense is entitled to be defended by a lawyer of his choice. I was with Gani Fawemi. I was his deputy by 1985. He led me to defend Colonel Peter Obasa. He led me to defend Chief Killer. He led me to defend Isaac Idio Udoka, Ibrahim Diko. He led me to defend others. So it is the right of an accused person to choose a lawyer. We call it the cab rank